Hey there, you might notice something a little different about me. You see, I played a game with anthropomorphic characters in it, so that automatically makes me a furry now. It's a decision that was completely forced onto me. I slipped in a metaphorical puddle and now I'm suddenly expected to buy a $3,000 suit. But that's not what I'm upset about here. What I'm upset about is the fact that I ever even had to play Biomutant. Biomutant is an RPG featuring anthropomorphic characters in a post-apocalyptic world caused by pollution that resulted in crazy mutations in the environment all over the globe. The game starts off with a nice character creator. You can pick the type of creature you want to be, which has a determining factor on your looks and a small consideration on your stat allocation. This is then followed up by the mutation segment, which is responsible for most of your early point allocation, as well as some more of your character's body features. The last part is being able to pick your fur color, and after all that, I decided to make a fuchsia rodent with a banana for a jaw. You also get to pick your class, which decides whether you're good with guns, melee, magic, tanky, or any combination of these. Once you get into the game, you're quickly introduced to the game's morality system. You're given a decision and then confronted by a black and white flying squirrel that reaffirm if you really want to make that decision, the white squirrel being the good juju and the black one being the bad juju. This is a big annoyance that I've had with the morality system. Anytime you make a decision, they have to tell you, you just did a good thing. Are you sure you want to be known as a good person? Moving forward is the game's first combat encounter with a mini-boss named Lupa Lupin. This guy seems irrelevant at first, but is actually somewhat important later on. The game's combat is okay, but with some glaring flaws and oversights. You have your basic melee mash, some guns for long range, and magic, which is unlocked later on. There's also a set of special attacks for both ranged and melee weapons, but these are so awkward to use. The trailers make combat look like it's going to be some Devil May Cry or Bayonetta inspired hack and slash, but anything outside of regular attacks makes this way too difficult to accomplish. Instead of normal motion inputs or button combinations, these special attacks feel like you're entering some sort of Konami cheat code with the button combinations required. Even when these combos are pulled off, they don't chain together well enough to actually result in any flashy combos. For defensive options, there's dodges and parries, neither of which work very well. The parries have an incredibly poor indicator, and even then, I feel like timing it correctly still doesn't help me. The dodge helps most of the time, but sometimes it feels like it has no iframes, which results in me getting struck anyways. Eventually, we're met with some lore about how the world we see came to be. Basically, this big company called Toxnol had a ton of waste that they decided to just start dumping into the oceans. This eventually caused mutations in nature that gave them the power to start rising up against humanity. Humanity is now gone, and whatever is left is a result of those genetic mutations. Pushing forward, we're met with the game's first NPC, and after helping him from some random mobs, introduces himself as out of date. I called my grandma that once, and now I'm out of the will. The first thing I immediately noticed about this character was that he has both a peg leg and a wheelchair. We ask you to pick one disability from the list. One thing you'll notice about this NPC, along with everyone else in this game, is that they don't have actual voices, at least not human ones. Instead of talking, they have this Sims-like gibberish that they speak, which is then followed by the narrator translating their words.
The legend of the one-eyed child that grew up as an outcast is old and sad.
This would mean that the narrator is technically the only voice actor in the game, but that's also not entirely true because there's still specifically acknowledged voice actors for each character in the credits. So they went out of their way to get specific voice actors for each character and then just told them to say whatever the hell they want into the mic just for the narrator to do all the heavy lifting. Just makes no sense to me. Anyway, Out of Date is essentially this game's elder-type mentor character. He knows about everything that's gone down, he has a good understanding of how the world is functioning, and he has a plan for what to do next. Out of Date is telling us that we're the chosen ones, so to speak, and that our character has been trained in the methods of Wung Fu to fulfill some great destiny. This is followed by a childhood flashback where we meet the world's worst Elvis impersonator who calls himself Best Before. What are you, a carton of milk? I honestly have no idea what this flashback is supposed to be about. All I did was catch some butterflies, nearly drowned, watch some tree grow, and then Best Before gave me a pat on the back. After this, Out of Date takes us outside to explain the current problem facing the world. 4 giant creatures known as the World Eaters are eating at the roots of the World Tree, a giant tree in the center of the map that gives the land life and balance. The World Eaters have been causing tons of damage across the area, and if they successfully destroy the World Tree, then the land will essentially die out. It is, of course, our job as the main character to stop these World Eaters from destroying the Tree of Life. How we go about doing that depends on which tribe we side with. The Myriads see eye to eye with our mission, to prevent the World Eaters from destroying the Tree of Life and restoring balance to the land. The Jagni tribe, however, believes in literally the opposite of that. For whatever reason, they want to go completely against the main premise we were just taught and let the World Eaters destroy the Tree of Life, since they believe that it will give the land some sort of Windows-style reboot cleansing. Oh, an environmental crisis is destroying the planet? Have you tried turning it off and turning it on again? I decided to join the Jagni tribe because I just thought it would be funny. I have to actually travel to the fort where the Jagni tribe resides in order to join them, and the guy at the door tells me that they don't just let anyone in, but they'll make an exception for me because I seem different. I think I just got racially profiled by a skunk, but they let me in, so who cares? Their clan is run by this honey badger Sifu. He goes over their plan again and explains that before we can actually put this plan into motion, we have to wipe out the other tribes in their ongoing war to make sure that they don't get in our way. He sends us on our first mission to capture a rival outpost, but before we can get there, I'm rudely interrupted by a mini-boss who I kill with the world's deadliest game of Ring Around the Rosie. And right before I think all those interruptions are over with, my character starts tripping balls and we get another one of those damn childhood flashbacks. We see a couple of things this time. This otter named Goop teaches us how to swim by attempting to drown us. Apparently swimming uses ki, which is the same energy required to perform magic, and I like to imagine that Michael Phelps is a powerful wizard in this universe. We're also introduced to the game's crafting system and finally get a look at our mother, who trained us as a child and apparently trained all the other tribe leaders. And then this is when things start to come full circle again. Remember that Lupa Lupin guy we fought in the tutorial? Well, apparently he attacked the childhood village and killed the main character's parents, so he actually does have some amount of significance to the story. The flashback finally ends and I'm faced yet again with a mini-boss which I take down with that same kiting strategy. Yeah, you might have noticed by now, but I handled most combat encounters by just running away and blasting them with whatever my best gun was. I know this seems like a total pussy strap, but the problem is that the enemies have no gap closers, so I can just constantly run away from them and the game never punishes me for it. So we get into raiding this first outpost, and it's pretty basic stuff. Kill some enemies, rescue some allies, destroy some stuff, and then the outpost is claimed in the name of your tribe. I'll get more into this later. Out of Date congratulates us on our conquest and informs us that we need to start taking an initiative on the World Eaters. He points us towards a friend of his that's building a machine meant to combat one of the World Eaters, and it just so happens that this same friend is Goop, the same guy from the swimming tutorial. Oh yeah, the child drowner. Good times. So this is where we essentially come to meet the game's main story loop. You meet an NPC from your childhood, you help them build a machine, you get some ammunition that's used to distract the World Eater while you fight it, rinse and repeat. It would be a decent enough concept if you only had to do this once or twice, but it becomes generic all too quick. The mechanism that we help Goop build is some sort of jet ski with a launcher attached that fires off rubber ducks as a distraction. We finally reached the first boss, and yeah, this guy kinda fucking blows. Porcupine is this behemoth that attacks by splashing with waves like some child at a water park. At first, I was super confused as to how to fight this guy. He starts off in an invincible state, and there's these mines that are scattered all over the arena that you can hook onto and drag around. At first I thought I was supposed to drag the mines into the boss so that he would be open to damage, but that didn't seem to be working. Only after like a dozen deaths did I realize that he has these blisters on top of his feet that need to be shot in order for him to be vulnerable. It took me a while to figure this out because even when you do try to shoot at these blisters, your bullets just go all over the place because this game has such inaccurate firing. It's similar to the blue mechanic in Fortnite. After the water segment, we're brought to an on-ground area where we have to fight him without the use of Goop's jet ski, and this is where things become incredibly annoying. This fight just displays what's so wrong with the game's combat and its lack of functionality. I constantly dodge attacks that still manage to hit me anyways, and button prompts are so small I can hardly see them. Not to mention that this guy has a tendency to just spam attacks, which makes this fight insanely annoying. This is about 3 hours into the game for me. I'd been playing on hard difficulty this whole time, but by this point I had already asserted that I don't like the game, and I decided to lower the difficulty in order to lower my suffering. After the fight is done and over with, I meet back with Out of Date at the base of the Tree of Life where he's uncovered the Ark, an ancient old world bit of tech that can be used to escape in the event of a cataclysmic event. Out of Date says the Ark has enough space for me, him, my Sifu, and 4 other people of my choosing. This then gets integrated into the morality system where I get to choose who I want to be in the Ark, and they might join depending on my moral alignment. After this begins the next round of the World Eater loop. Meet a childhood friend, build some machine, catch some critters, yada yada yada. Gizmo is the NPC that prepares us for the next World Eater, and this guy's building a pretty sick ass alien inspired mech to control. The mech is armed with a red panda that Gizmo fucking shoves into one of the barrels of the mech. The second World Eater we encounter is the Jumbo Puff, and why in God's name is this thing called a Jumbo Puff? This thing looks like a buff cookie monster with a maggot for a face. This fight mostly takes place with the mech, but the last phase has the Jumbo Puff suck you up and defeat him from the inside before finally puking you out. Okay, whatever. My Sifu, once again, congratulates me on fighting the World Eater along with Gizmo, and this is our first opportunity to give someone one of our seats on the Ark. However, Gizmo actually turns down the offer because we don't see eye to eye. What a fucking burn. This dude would literally rather die in the apocalypse than bear being in my presence on his only hope of surviving simply because he disagrees with me. Sorry, dude, I know it's the apocalypse and all, but you still listen to Nickelback, and I can't be seen around you. You know how it is. Anyways, we reconvene with Out of Date, who out of nowhere tells us that our next priority is not with the World Eaters or with the Tribor, but with Lupin, who apparently has his camp set up right outside the Tree of Life. So we engage Lupin at his shitty little camp, and he explains why he raided our village on that night. Apparently Lupin lost his mother at a very young age because our mom killed his mom because she was a monster hunter. Oh, sorry, she didn't hunt monsters, she hunted monsters. Yeah, this is another weird thing that this game does in its world building. Tons of basic words have different pronunciations or just entirely different words. Oh, that's not a monster, that's a munster. That's not your mom, that's your muma. That's not a horse, that's a— Okay, that one actually isn't a horse, I'll give you that one.
That's a pling-plong.
The fuck you just call me? Anyways, this is the point at which the Lupin plot begins to feel really forced to me. The developers seem to think that this revenge plot would make the story so much more cool, but it really adds nothing, and Lupin just shows up randomly with no rhyme or reason. The Lupin fight itself is nothing special. It plays out like any other mini-boss type fight, except that he can actually keep up with me sometimes, and it ends off with him being tentacle fucked by the Tree of Life. We tell Out of Date about how we totally wrecked Lupin in that 1v1, and he sends us to find some guy who wants us to build something and collect some stuff so we can fight another World Eater, blah blah blah. The next World Eater is the Hoof Puff, and why do they give it this name? He doesn't even have any hooves! This boss is also a little generic. The only thing I really like about him is the face he makes whenever I trip him. Then Out of Date actually tells us that we need to take care of the Tribor before we take care of the last World Eater because things are getting too out of hand over there. It's worth noting that I actually only took over one outpost and then moved on to taking down the World Eaters. The World Eater missions were pretty repetitive, but these outpost takeovers really take it to a whole new level. They try to spice things up a little bit between each mission, but they still have a lot of repetition to them. Go in, kill some enemies, maybe kill a mini-boss with the same patterns as every other mini-boss, and then the outpost is yours. There is one task where you have to destroy some moth hives in order to piss them off enough to drive some enemies out of the base, but even this is still just a generic enemy mowing mission with a small side objective slapped onto it. You can just tell how lazy the devs were with how each capture ends. Your character plants your clan's flag down, the rival Sifu says, "You made them weaker, but they won't give up." Then, your Sifu thanks you, your tribe is growing stronger. Outpost shops get open, and then your Sifu gets the red carpet treatment. After capturing 3 outposts, me and the boys gather up to take down the enemy fort. You start the mission off by being flung over a wall, and then you realize that forts are just giant outposts with a ton of enemies in the way. At the end of the fort is the rival Sifu, and you do get the choice to talk to him and defuse the situation, but I never spec'd into charisma, so this never worked out for me. I'll give this guy some credit that he at least has the ability to keep up with me when I'm kiting him, but I'm also quite certain that he only has 1 or 2 attacks, so I'm still deducting points for that. After kicking his furry ass, my Sifu gives me another choice. Either we can kill him, lock him in prison forever, or convert him to our side. I chose to convert him to our side because I'm actually a really nice person when I'm not slaying all your guards. But then another clan shows up to the doorstep, and I'm told about 3 more outposts that they have that are also repetitive. Oh my god! Get to the outposts, kill all the guards, capture the outposts. Your Sifu thanks you. Fly into the fort again, kill everyone, meet their leader, fight him. This guy also has only 1 attack. Then recruit him again because I'm actually a really nice person when I'm not. At this point, the Sifu finally says that we can just end the war or proceed with our utter annihilation. I, of course, chose the former, and thank God I did, because apparently this game has a total of 6 tribes, meaning if I continued the war, I probably would have had to do this repetitive bullshit 3 more times. For the last time, I regroup with Out of Date, who scolds me for finishing the Tribor before finishing off the World Eaters, despite the fact that he literally told me to settle the war first. There was literally no active objective to combat the next World Eaters, so I was basically forced to clear up the Tribor, and now I'm being belittled for doing exactly that? Moving on, this guy named Wiz is apparently building some submarine type contraption that should help us take down the final World Eater. This guy says he remembers us from our childhood, but he's actually the only one of these helper characters I don't remember, so sorry bro, I guess you must have been the kid who sat at the back of the class. For some reason, part of building this submarine is getting this hand-shaped mount, which I will admit is kind of fucking epic. Its weapon is to make a finger gun which fires actual bullets at the enemy, and I have to give huge props to designers for this one. This is actually really creative. We also have to get some oil from this guy who's super obsessed with the trains, but I can relate to you, bro. Then we're ready to take on the final World Eater, Merc Puff, who's a giant underwater snapping turtle. This guy is way easier than the other World Eaters because our sub is armed primarily with missiles which do a ton of damage. World Eater is finished off, and Out of Date tells us that, god damn it, do we still have to deal with that Lupin guy? So even though Lupin has been strapped in place for what is probably multiple in-universe days, he comes back just at the right time for us to finish off what looks like a zombie version of himself. Again, I feel like the developers wanted to cap off with some sort of epic closure to their revenge story, but it just seems so goddamn forced. Spoilers, but the Lupin fight is pretty generic and actually takes a long time to finish off since he's so tanky and has 2 separate phases. After he's finished off, the ground starts to shake and we realize that things are coming to an end for the Tree of Life. We evacuate into the Tree of Life where we hop aboard the Ark with the characters that I invited on, and then the tree fucking explodes like it's some kind of underground World War II bomb, and then the game just ends. So one thing that confused me when I first beat the game was, why did the Tree of Life still die if I fought off all the World Eaters? Well, I sided with the Jagni tribe, right? And their goal was to let the World Eaters have their way with the Tree of Life, yeah? So then why did I even take on the World Eaters in the first place? In some of these fights, you can actually see that the boss just goes back to gnawing on the roots right afterwards. So then what was the point of fighting the World Eaters? This is a big problem that the game has across the board. It tries to be so many things and tries to accomplish so much that it never fully achieves any one of those goals. It's the world's largest buffet full of food that's all gone rotten. It's an open world game, it's an RPG, it's a hack and slash, it has loot-based combat, it has a character creator, it has a crafting system, it has a morality system, and a dialogue system. It incorporates magic into its combat, it has some light puzzle solving, it does the dishes, it walked the dog, and it even fucked my wife. And that's impressive because I'm single. And this is on top of the already lack of polish that the game has. The game can look really good at times with its vibrant landscape environments, but it falls apart in certain areas. The water effects just look really weird, and the fur effects on the World Eaters remind me of Little Big Planet 2, which is pretty bad since that's a game from 2 generations ago. The animations are super whack, and the audio design along with them is just totally lacking. What else is there? The UI is super crap and it's hard to navigate at times. Every conversation with every NPC is just this boring still shot that never moves until you stop talking to them, and none of the NPCs actually feel like real people. They're just these statues that blurt out expository dialogue about destiny all the time and hardly ever have their own thoughts on anything. Even if I do something that clearly goes against what they believe, they'll still say, "Well, you do make a good point." This game is just bad. It's a good idea on paper, an RPG with DMC style combat, but it's just executed very poorly and leaves a lot to be desired. Anything that is there only functions and doesn't really do anything that's worth player investment. But at the end of it all, I just want to know, what's the best way to wash marker off your face?